OKDoomer, welcome back to this fabulous conversation that we started in February with Lord Hugh R. Adumbas and me, Torstein Vidal, for the Going South channel. So I think you, back in February, early February, you said this thing was gonna be peaking or over or something in April. This COVID-19.
Yeah, they said it would peak in April, and it's I mean I think it might be peaking. It's the lockdowns and that cover it, but the thing is that people think there's one peak and it's obviously coming in waves. And so they're not ready for that. They're not ready for the duration. They think it's just, survive a bit of lockdown for a few weeks and then we can all have a party. And it's nothing like that. If you just look, historically speaking, these pandemics last for years. A vaccine is probably 12 months to 18 months away. And it's not even certain whether there can be a vaccine because it potentially looks like you might not be able to get immunity to it even naturally, and that's a disaster of huge proportions. But the latest thing I read was that it attacks your T cells. So people are saying it's sort of like HIV/AIDS. It's just HIV takes over and replicates in the T cell, and this doesn't. But it still disables your T cells because people, right after the disease, 2 weeks later, they don't seem to have immunity, and so it's still an emerging picture. But it looks pretty dark. It's everybody has all this faith in these things like, oh, we have a vaccine, and it's like it's not guaranteed that the vaccine is even possible. Yeah. Even then, it can mutate. So.
I think they say things like, "Yeah, we have a vaccine candidate, yay!" But they don't. What people who read that don't know is that everything starts as a vaccine candidate. It's like you can have like a handful of blueberries, and that's a vaccine candidate. But you have to test it like for a year or so to find out if it actually works. So yeah.
Yeah, the last thing I heard, there were 20 vaccine candidates.
Yeah.
And basically it works like this: if you work in a pharmaceutical company, the CEO says, this is huge profit potential in this. Get a vaccine out there immediately, and of course the guys, get everything in the kitchen sink and just trial it out there. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean the vaccine is close. It just means that everybody wants to cash in.
Yeah, it's a bit like if you have like a little boy of 5 years old and he says, "I want to be an astronaut." It's a bit like that. It's like between that little guy wanting to be an astronaut and him actually flying in space, having done all the education and study, is a bit of a way to go, right? It's like
well, I think they've had various things. I mean, because they've had SARS and MERS, they've got potential tools to work with, but it's more or less just throwing things together and just trying them out on a bunch of ferrets and seeing what happens.
Yeah.
It's not as deterministic as people think. They think, you just get the DNA sequence, engineer the cipher that's the counter to that, and bingo. And it's a whole lot more hidden than that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, just be prepared for disappointments on the vaccine front. And then the other thing about vaccines that no one seems to get is it's very dependent on this R0 or R0, basically the infection rate. And from what I've seen, it's coming in about 5.7. So that's really, really high, especially from what it was touted as at first from China. And what it means is the most important thing you get out of that calculation is how the percentage of the population that has to be inoculated or have to get herd immunity.
Mm.
And at 5.7, it turns out to be 82% in the last paper I read.
All right.
So when you have a vaccine, you still have to roll it out to 82% of the world's population.
Yeah.
Now, you couldn't even roll a Chinese fortune cookie out to 82% of the world's population.
Mm.
It is, the logistics of it is just incredible, let alone, rolling out a vaccine where every 82% of the world's population gets a shot. I mean, just think about the logistics of that. It's unimaginable.
Yeah, and then maybe you need more than one shot. It's like,
yeah, and then it mutates, and then it
yeah.
mutates. So all I'm trying to convey to people is that we're in for the long haul. Just assume that this is here for keeps. Lockdowns come in waves. It's really the most sane thing I saw was a quote from one of these epidemiologists who said, we're not clear of the virus when every single country declares 0 cases.
No.
And that probably will never be again. It's probably the virus is here to stay. We will never get to that stage. Is what
Greenland has 0 cases. We got it down to 0.
But you're isolated, right?
Yeah, we stopped the flights. That helps a lot.
Yeah, so the 0 cases on the island where I am. So islands, I bet you the only nations now that don't have it are islands. That places like Cook Islands and the Marshall Islands and
Antarctica
and things like that. But the thing is, it's as soon as the isolation is lifted, cases will come in. It's basically there's a certain percentage of the population, and it's just a matter of time before one of those people come in. So it's it's kind of like it's kind of like putting your hand on a beach ball and holding it underwater. That's what lockdown is like. I mean, and everybody goes, oh no, there's hope because Spain and France they're starting, the rate is starting to come down, and so I mean, it's what you're really saying is this beach ball is staying underwater, and I say take your hand off and see what happens.
Yeah, I think we just passed 2 million cases worldwide, according to BNO News, and the interesting thing I think is that from 1 million to 2 million, it took only 12 days. And that's the same 12 days as from 100,000 to 200,000 cases. So that means we're still on the exponential curve here. Because 1 million to 2 million is, of course, 1 million new cases in 12 days. But last time it was only 100,000 new cases in 12 days, right? So it goes faster and faster still. But having said that, it's actually worse than that because it's been recently documented that the Americans, the reason it looks like it's peaking in America is that the testing peaked. They reached the testing the maximum number of tests that they're able or willing or whatever to do. So they actually started testing less, and that's when the new cases numbers looked like they were peaking. So of course if you stop testing or you just flatline your testing in an exponential event like this, then it will cause the positive numbers to appear to be peaking. So it's that's in a fairly civilized country like America. But of course now the virus is on attack in Africa and in India and in all of these other places in the world that have an even worse, if that's possible, even worse health system as America. So all of these new fronts for the virus now, that they are generally worse at testing and treating people. So you have to keep that in mind as well. Even though the numbers in the graphs are still exponential and going faster and faster, you are reaching these bottlenecks, for the max number of tests that you're able to do, right? So it's not looking very good. But I think we can I think we can be pretty sure that different regimes, political regimes, China, America, India, Russia, perhaps, will try to. They will have different reasons for trying to keep the numbers artificially low. You know, like Japan. Japan wanted to have the Olympics, and it looked like the numbers were flatlining and going to zero for a while. And then the Olympic Committee said, no, you're not allowed to have it this year. And then Japan started rising again, in the statistics. So all kinds of other regimes, for other reasons, or maybe the same reasons, will also uh, try to fit the science around the politics. Like, for instance, if Trump really wants to get everybody back to work, he will make it so that the numbers somehow allow for that, right?
Yeah, this it happens all the time. I mean, I'm reading this Journal of a Plague Year, Daniel Defoe from 1665. They did it then. They basically, and the same reason for commerce. They want to get back to commerce. So then they lie with the statistics, and all that happens is that the rumor mill starts. And so they have a bigger problem because they have uncertainty and risk. Because, at the moment, people are all rallying to the flag, and even Trump is getting support because it's a natural defensive tactic to run to the leader, even if the leader is as good as a ham sandwich. But at some point they lose complete faith in the state and the leadership, and once you've lost that faith, you can't get it back. Whatever you do, there's no amount of truth you can tell after everybody realizes you're lying through your teeth. And so that's where we will get to next. It's predictable that they will lie to get everybody back to work. There will be all these rumors saying, I went back to work, and people are dropping like flies. It will be greatly amplified by, anecdote about the numbers. And then people will lose faith in the government. And then basically we will be in this downward cycle where everybody gets to. Looking back at those things like 1665, where they peak seems to be consistent, and that's they peak when everybody loses hope, right at the point where every strategist, everybody that went, put their faith in religion, put their faith in atheism. I'm talking in 1665 even now. Daniel Defoe goes through all these anecdotes of the people, and then everybody has their strategy. The quacks, they have all these quack remedies, they have all these scientific remedies, and it only stops when all of them are exhausted. Everybody says there is no way to escape this disease. We are all going to die. This is the end of humanity, and then it suddenly gets lifted. It always seems to get to that point.
It's a bit like the Brits. The British say about the Americans that an American will always do the right thing after all other options are exhausted.
It's very like that. That's very present. But in the meantime, they undermine themselves because I can't believe that the cases are not rampant in Africa and India. I keep on seeing these headlines. America is worst in the world, has the biggest death toll. It's like, I do not believe it for a second. I cannot believe that Africa, you can see the cases. Every country has them.
Yeah, but the only reason to believe that America might be actually ahead at this point is that they travel more. Just like Europeans travel more, so they get it faster in the outbreak because they fly more. They're richer.
Yeah, but Africa has high population density centers, and they connected by road, so that everything goes by truck. And so the truckers, that's how AIDS got around. It's by the truckers. So if when you're on a plane in a Western country, you're at least semi-isolated from the passenger next to you. On an African train, it's basically Sardine City, and the same on the truck and stuff like that. It's basically shipping the virus around in containers virtually.
Yeah,
You see,
but
our goods are shipped in.
you have the problem that there has been episodes where somebody is sitting at the back of the bus and somebody who is sick is at the front of the bus, and they get it through the aerosol contamination of the air in the bus. So it's all, if you're gonna compare to to AIDS, it's like saying that if you go on a bus today or on a plane, you are as likely to get the disease as you were for AIDS if you had sex with people on the train back in the day, right? So these days you only need to sit and read a book in the bus or in the plane to get
Yeah,
this
but
virus.
the kind of picture I'm trying to paint is that think of all the goods. I mean, most of the stuff go. If you look at like flight trackers, I mean, in the
Mm,
states, you see all these planes going. They're not all passenger planes. A lot of them are air freight. Now, air freight is not that big in Africa. Most of the goods that we get shipped around are shipped around in containers.
mm,
But in Africa, the goods are shipped, with the passengers on top of them. So, if you get a banana in Africa, somebody was probably sitting on it while it was on the train coming to you.
yeah.
I mean, it's a lot more integrated with the goods and movement of people
Mm,
than it is for us.
mm,
So it's not. I'm just trying to say, don't think it's all traveling on the back of a mule in Africa.
mm.
It, it's a truck can travel 2 countries or 3 countries in a day, and
Yeah.
it's got 500 people on the back of it. So it's like a much
Yeah,
less.
but it's still a case that you have to get it to Africa. You have to get it to Uganda and Kenya, etc., before it starts spreading. So in that game, I think Europe and America was ahead because there was so much more Asia to Europe and Asia to America travel in the early days, like in February, March. So,
Yeah, but it's a slower start,
mm,
but I mean it's still exponential growth. I mean,
mm,
the, who was it that said the reason why humans are going to go extinct is because they can't understand the exponential growth function,
yeah,
and that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing people look at the early stages and say, oh, it's relatively flat, in Indonesia or whatever, and say, oh, they're doing a good job there because the graph's relatively flat. And you say, like, it's an exponential graph.
yeah,
It's flat to start with. It's meaningless. You look at Africa and say, well, Africa hasn't got many cases, and say, because they're at the flat tail of the exponential graph, you'll be
yeah,
horrified in a few weeks' time.
yeah. And another, I would say it's a mistake, but it's an interesting conundrum that what most statisticians, oh my god, most people who do statistics, right, statisticians or whatever, what they do is that they say, okay, Brazil only has 1,000 cases, but we have to divide 1,000 for the whole population, and then it's almost nothing, right? So they do that. They do it per million or whatever, right? But that's actually what you really should do is multiply almost with the total population, right? The thing is that this is not going to end tonight, right? So if you have, yeah, it's the same thing that you are saying, that we are at the flat big start end of the exponential curve, right? So really you need to look at what is coming further down the road from Brazil and from India, right?
Exactly. You
Yeah.
see, what people are confusing two things, and I think the government is maliciously encouraging this misinterpretation, and that's they're
Mm,
misinterpreting um, basically isolation and eventual herd immunity.
mm,
So these lockdowns and that they talk about beating the virus and things like that. It means that they're talking into containment. Now we missed containment. We missed containment in February. That was the
yeah.
big threshold. When basically in February, when we passed the thing, I saw this article in New Scientist that said unequivocally we've passed the stage of containment. At that stage, I wrote an email to all my family and said, this is now going to be 80% of the world. This is huge. And they were like, are you sure it's nothing? And I said, no, we've passed containment.
Yeah.
That is the tipping point. That's kind of like a point of no return. Now they still talk about containment, like we've got this virus in, like lockdown is going to do containment. And they encourage that misinterpretation. Lockdown cannot contain it. It can't keep it out of Africa. Every country in Africa has it. So it's not, we passed that bridge. It's gone. But where we're heading for is a dreadful state, and that's herd immunity. That's the next milestone. If you miss the crucial milestone of containment, but they're not telling people we missed containment. They're still faking them out as if it can still be contained and it can still be beaten. It's not. The virus has won. Now it's just how big is the win, and the win is. You can work it out pretty easily with the formulas they have, and it works out to 82%. So that's the current estimate.
Yeah,
so
it's like
just a question of what the death rate is, and the death rate is very hard to tell. But presumably it's 1 or 2%. Although there's some indications like Italy started to look a bit like 7%. But I guess that I'm still sticking with what I said in February, and that's it's 1 or 2% of the world's population is going to die, and it'll be a continuous thing. It's not going to be die and then this is all over. It's just like AIDS. It just becomes endemic, which means it has a high death rate, but it's flat, and the number of people that get it is constant, and that's where this will end up. But nobody's saying that to people yet.
No, it's like with the containment, to stop it from spreading at all. It's like if you are in a small village in East Greenland, and there is one last ship leaving in October, before the ice settles on the sea, and then the next ship leaves in May or June, right? So it's like if you miss the ship for containment in October, then the next ship that leaves is for herd immunity, like 80-90% in the next summer, right? It's not going an endless stream of ships. It's just either you get this ship or you get the other ship, right? So
yeah, and even herd immunity is not the end of the road, because they still don't know whether you can get reinfected. So that's not relapse. That's relapse is something different. But reinfection means that you don't have antibody immunity to the disease after you've been exposed to it. So that implies that a vaccine is not possible. It also implies that herd immunity is not possible. It means that you have equal number of chance of getting it in seasons, say, an equal number of chance of dying from it, and it'll just stay that way forever, not ever change. Now that's not the way people are thinking it.
No.
But they're still thinking it in terms of martial terms and stuff. But this disease is not an army. This is not the Wehrmacht in Poland. It's far more like an algorithm, like a computer algorithm. It's more like Conway's Game of Life than it is, some marching soldier. Literally in Africa, in South Africa, the president comes in camo and a beret and says, "We're going to war against this virus." It's like, you're a moron. That's all I can say. You're a freaking moron. And people are going to die unnecessarily with that kind of attitude, because if you think of it, there's an old thing they teach you, and if you go to sea and you do if you learn to sail a yacht or get your skipper's license, almost definitely that somebody will tell you, don't personify the sea. in sea survival training, it's very important not to personify the sea, because otherwise you get into this battle against the sea and you try and defeat it, and the sea doesn't give a rat's ass. The sea just does what it does, and you will annihilate yourself thinking you'll beat it when you get into trouble. And so they try and warn you about that kind of behavior, but we're full on over the whole globe personifying this as if as if it's some demon that we can beat. And it's like, it's not a demon, it's a 30,000 base pair bit of RNA. It's a chemical. You can't. I mean, it's ridiculous.
I think you have to touch on the death rate a bit as well, because we now recently we passed on the same day we passed 2 million cases, and we passed 125,000 fatalities, deaths, right? And if you just do the simple case versus fatalities on that, which is sort of the mainstream media death rate, that's about 6%. You know, that's sort of the happy death rate, if that's such a word can be used. But the closed case death rate, you know, for everybody who has gotten the disease and are either deceased or they are recovered, right? Then you're currently at 21%. That's the people who are declared recovered by the doctors or the hospitals, or taken by the undertaker and put in the earth, right? So that's 21%, and that is still sort of contaminated by faked Chinese numbers. So it's actually higher than 21% if you exclude the Chinese numbers. So the 6% is, to put it simply, the 6% is like you take the number of dead people divided by all the people currently infected or who have been infected through the whole winter, and that's that number, the product of that division, the 6%, that assumes that everybody still not dead will survive the disease, right? So the 6%, that's a very optimistic. It's a very optimistic figure, because it says that only the people who died till now will die. No one else will die, right? So if one person dies after you write 6% on your sheet of paper, then it's higher than what you, right?
Yeah, but the reinfection changes the whole equation, because what they report these statistics now on people that have infected, people that have died, and people that have recovered. What the assumption there is that the people that have recovered then are in the clear. Yeah. And then you look at the entire population and you see these are the vulnerable ones. And you say, well, that only applies if there's no reinfection. If reinfection is possible, the population is infinite. The virus can chow down a second time on you. The fact that you got it and recovered doesn't mean you're in the green. They even report it in green with green figures, like these guys in the clear. They're not in the clear. They didn't get it once. If they haven't got antibodies and there's no immunity, no natural immunity to it, which appears to be the case now, coming out of I think it was Korea. South Korea is saying there's 941 reinfections now. People have tested positive again after recovering from it, which means the population is infinite, and if you've got it, it means nothing. You can get it again maybe 2 weeks later, and then this time you die.
Yeah, and so you could say
the statistics are meaningless.
You could say that just the fact that you and I are talking about whether or not it's possible to get immune or be reinfected in mid-April, that tells you that this has not been established scientifically that it is, that you do get immunity. We were still talking about this, and about that. I just heard the great American leader Donald Trump say that he would investigate the World Health Organization and he would stop funding for WHO, and that's fantastic. That's one of the best things I heard from Donald Trump since he pulled out of the Paris Agreement. So,
I just saw he's blocked. He's reduced the WHO funding by 15%.
Yeah, because the thing is that the
whole world is going nuts over it.
Yeah, because for WHO, and also the European CDC, the European Center for Disease Control in Stockholm, they both parroted the Chinese in mid-January. Just 3 months ago, the WHO and the ECDC in Stockholm told journalists and the press that, yeah, this COVID thing, it can't transfer from person to person. It doesn't infect one human from another human. So that's that's a level of incompetence that you have in Stockholm, in Sweden, and in Geneva at the World Health Organization. So these people should be behind bars. They should be in jail. Seriously. One of the first things that the WHO was fighting America for, they were fighting Donald Trump for, was that he wanted to stop the flights from China. And Geneva and WHO put up a huge fight to make Trump make another decision, to make him change his mind, because nobody can stop flights from China because we need Chinese people to fly with the disease, and you have to contain it in the good old UN way by spreading it around as fast as we can. Yeah.
Well, the WHO has a lot of blame. There's a lot of blame to go around for the WHO, because they didn't declare it a pandemic. They kept on delaying it, and then I eventually found out the reason why, and it's because after SARS, they sold these. A number of countries, including China, had SARS bonds. Like good old capitalism. They said, well, for the next pandemic, we must fund it, and so we make these SARS bonds, and obviously the bonds get paid out if there's a next pandemic. So the WHO didn't declare a pandemic because China had all these bonds, and they didn't want to have, basically have to pay out. It's kind of like an insurance policy, and they're just saying it's not a pandemic, we're letting it go around the world. If they said if there's a pandemic, then all these protocols kick in. They allowed those protocols to be delayed purely so that China didn't and other countries didn't have their SARS bombs basically collapse. So for pure cash, the WHO has allowed it to spread all over the world. It's not really clear whether it could have been contained, but it might have been. So basically, the WHO might be on the really could be accused of genocide if for cash, for straight cash, basically because of their influence from China. So Trump is not entirely wrong. The WHO is compromised by China, and they've shown that all the way. And so, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, everybody looks to these authority figures as if they're kind of saviors. The WHO's not anybody's savior. If the WHO was defunded tomorrow and they all died of coronavirus within a minute, it wouldn't make a blind bit of difference to the epidemic, the outcome, or anybody in the world. In fact, it might even help.
Yeah.
So it's there is a different way to read it. I mean, Trump's a psychopath, but not everything psychopaths do and say is automatically wrong.
It's like the saying that even a stopwatch shows the time right twice a day. So he showed the right time. Trump showed the right time when he pulled out of the Paris Agreement, which was all bogus anyway. But he doesn't know that. But he made the right decision, and he also made the right decision and showed the right time when he decided to investigate WHO and to stop their funding. So But that's the last one is actually for the right reasons because they fooled everybody and killed hundreds of thousands of people. So yeah.
And just on the issue of psychopathy and leadership, which is one of my pet topics, there is this syndrome that I've noticed with psychopaths, having worked with them as CEOs in American business and politicians and various people in the military, where they're full-blown psychopaths and they promote it because that's what our society does, and even laud it. But one of the things that I've noticed with them, and here Trump is a full-on psychopath. The Goldwater ruling has totally been thrown out. He's so egregious that many psychiatrists have come out and said, no, he's forget the Goldwater ruling. I'm saying he's a psychopath. He is full blown. There's no doubt. I don't have to get I get him on the clinic and knows it. And one of the strange things about these psychopaths is their behavior is so egregious that very often, in just doing completely off the wall illogical stuff, it turns out that they actually do something right. So everybody who's trying to be logical and do things right and do things in a rational way is often their own worst enemy. And you come in with somebody with a wrecking ball, like you say, the Paris Agreement is the Paris Agreement. Really, it's not a bad thing to pull out of it. Now, everybody in the liberals and environmentalists, they pull their hair out and say it's completely dysfunctional. It should be boycotted just because it's perpetuating, it's
business as usual.
Perpetuating this terrible behavior, this dysfunctional behavior. And it's the same with the COP. It's like XR, like we have to go to the next COP and say boycott it. You're just enabling this dysfunctional behavior and endorsing it and legitimizing it by showing interest in it. You should just treat it like it is. So Trump, for the wrong reasons, does the right thing. And that is a big trait with psychopaths. They'll very often do the right thing for the wrong reasons. And so they get lucky in that way. But even things like the EPA regulations and that, just scrapping those could be beneficial because, it could be a social tipping point where people, while the EPA is there are a large number of people in America that think, well, everything's under control, and we have some people there for that. We have an environmental protection agency, and therefore you're an alarmist, and all these guys are professionals, and they know what they're doing. And then you say, well, all the bets are off. The EPA has no regulations whatsoever. Then people start to question the whole system and say, okay, there are no safeguards. So even something like, lifting the EPA restrictions can have a rebound effect that's entirely unanticipated. So, psychopaths get lucky.
and these days, the one of the consequences of the whole lockdown thing could very well be a financial collapse and bankruptcy for like 50, 60, 70% of these companies, these corporations who are doing the pollution, that you needed the EPA regulations for. So it's like, if some psychopath within the system planted this virus, it's pretty sure going to a blowback situation soon, I think. Or what do you think about that?
Well, there's so many industries that need to die, that are going to die from this, but it's not clear what happens afterwards. So take, for instance, the tar sands and, the fracking industry. They do. They say they can only survive for 12 more months with this kind of economy in lockdown. And really, they're lying through their teeth as always. They can't. They were already underwater. So basically, you can take it as read that the tar sands might be saved from this. The fracking industry is probably going to be binned after this. It should have been before. Things like the airline industry, they should all be canned. They're going to go bankrupt. The tourist industry, the cruise industry, all these guys are all going to go bankrupt. They're not going to be bailed out. The airlines will probably be nationalized. Already Alitalia is nationalized. And so, it's a very different world afterwards, but it's a better I think it sets the clock back a little bit. But there's this dangerous thing that you keep on hearing now from people like NXO, and they think, well, we have a reprieve now because we've got extra time because Comrade COVID has stopped the clock now and gives us breathing space. And I say, like, no, look at the Arctic ice. It's plummeting like crazy. There's no respite. The thing is that there's no activism. But that doesn't mean that, no activism in the streets, but that doesn't mean the climate stopped or the methane stopped.
There is some...
methane spiking, the CO2 spiking, there's a huge ozone hole and the ice is melting. There's no reprieve from COVID.
But there is some origami, some paper folding activism I've seen on YouTube.
I've got no faith in that. I've actually, I'm inquiring if I can get one of those paper boats because with sea level rise, I'm thinking that if you get enough paper boats, that can save you.
It's like, last year in the Easter, we had these huge pink sailboats in the streets in London. And in 2020 Easter, we have these small, tiny paper origami sailboats made from XR folders, I think, from junk.
But I tell you that those origami paper boats, that I gotta say something about it. Because you cannot always be nice, right? There is a time when it's just inappropriate to be nice. If this we're far beyond a situation on this planet, and environmentally speaking, where it's way worse than when Hitler went into Poland. You can't be making origami paper boats and being nice when in 1939. Look, if this is 1933 or something like that, fine. But you guys have got to get with it. What you're communicating is that there is no emergency. It's just a paper boat, thing. It's this is not a church fete. And by being nice, you're causing harm because you're causing complacency. And they don't get it. They think you can be nice all the way into the trenches in the Somme. Look, this is World War I, Battle of the Somme. We're about to go over the top. Stop with the nice.
But
it's not appropriate.
What if they had fought World War I with origami? Like a competition between the teams. Would that be fantastic?
No. I'm getting. You just made me suicidal. If I had some cyanide within reach, I would take it now. I really.
Okay, so you're not totally happy with the Extinction Rebellion, but in February we called our first chat. We called it Extinction Contagion. So that's going better than the first Extinction Rebellion run last year. So, how sure are you that there are not deep ecologists lurking behind the curtain for this virus?
There are. I'm trying to comb them out on XRMed. Oh, you mean there's a conspiracy theory?
No, I'm meaning like...
like 12 Monkeys style,
Yeah, like 12 Monkeys. Then this guy went on a plane and he had bought tickets to Kinshasa, Tokyo, Beijing, Los Angeles. And when he came to airport control, he was ordered by air security to open these canisters with the virus. so this is like 12.
It's the Rajneesh. So you remember the Rajneeshis up in the northwest where I am? They did one of the first fire attacks in an election, and then there's the guys on the sarin attacks in Tokyo.
Yeah.
That I can't remember what that cult was called, but this is perfectly out of a plot for basically deep ecology. It's straight out of that playbook. I don't think it was. I mean, I think it looks like a bioweapon. Have you heard this really crazy ass conspiracy theory that it came naturally from pangolins or bats in a wet market?
I don't believe those conspiracy theories. I think it's so cruel. I think it's so cruel that crazy people who have conspiracy theories is one thing, but to put animals into them, that's just cruel. I mean, I'm against it.
Yeah, well, why blame it on the bats? I mean, these conspiracy theorists are sick, man.
Yeah.
Harmless bats are lovely creatures, harmless things,
Mm.
and then all these conspiracy theories go and blame this virus on the bats.
Yeah, and it's also racist because they say that some Chinese person was bit by a bat. And that's an old racist trope that Asian people get bitten by flying mammals. You know, and this goes way back, goes thousands of years back. That Westerners have been telling stories about flying mammals biting Asian people. That we should just stop with that. You know, it's just cruel and racist.
Yeah, I think it's zoophobic that people blame the animals for these
Yeah.
diseases. Like it's so obviously man-made and not.
It's man-made.
About the coronavirus.
Is that in your book? Is that in the book that you issued in December?
No, I said that basically they would come from. You see, the way I thought it would happen was I got the order wrong. I thought that there would be financial collapse first. I was actually right on that one. I told people in December that the financial collapse was coming. There would be a reckoning at the end of the year, and I was right. People think that all of this collapse comes from the virus. It's not. It preceded the virus. It was happening in January.
Yeah.
So I thought it would be financial collapse, then breadbasket failures, basically supply chain and breadbasket failures, and due to climate change as well. And then I thought that would lead to pandemics and pests and the rest of the four horsemen. So I got the order slightly wrong, but a pandemic was always on the cards, for. But what I did point out though, which I claim credit for anticipating this, is that if it is a bioweapon, and I think it is, because the Chinese government is the behavior is so squirrely and so guilty, and so I think then that there is this thing which I point out, and that's that in collapse, it's very possible for competing governments to get into a race to the bottom. So if you realize that we're in a planet with diminishing resources and diminishing opportunities, there's a tendency to try and cripple your neighbor. So the more you cripple them, the more, think of it as a folks. The more you cripple people in the boat, the more food and resources there is left for you. So as soon as you realize the food's running out, you have a food fight. And that would include all these things like using bioweapons and using things like geoengineering, all the geoengineering and solar radiation management. They have negative consequences for the countries downwind of you. And it's quite easy to see people using something like cloud seeding in India to get over the fact that their monsoons are stopping. And then that has a devastating effect in China because China's across the Himalayas, and their water would be reduced if India does cloud seeding. So all these things are really casus bellis and really provocations for war. These geoengineering and these things are political acts, and so you can easily see war following on from just suspicion that people might have deployed a bioweapon.
But what if seriously this time? What if the financial system was already tanking, right? And most serious analytics for the climate said that was already way past the tipping point and going down fast. So what if this COVID was like a cover story, intended as a cover story, to camouflage the total failure in the climate thing,
Yeah.
and also to camouflage the fact that the capitalist model of economy wasn't the best idea
Yes.
in the
Yeah.
universe.
Yeah, I think of that quite often. It's basically an extension of what I call the Milliways doctrine,
Uh,
which I think there is something like the Milliways doctrine, but I don't know what it's called. But it really is, it's the answer to why governments are not doing anything, even though liberals are pressuring them and environmentalists are pressuring them. And the answer is there's nothing to be done.
hmm,
They realized that we are screwed decades ago,
hmm,
and they're just running out the clock trying to prevent panic and doing these. Now, if you in those kind of situations, I always think back to that movie, the Last Emperor.
yeah.
And in the Last Emperor, there was, I mean, it was a very factual movie and it was part of history, that the Last Emperor suddenly realized that all the eunuchs, basically the court officials, were uh, totally corrupt. They'd been stealing from the kingdom and from the Forbidden Palace. And he said, okay, I'm having a full accounting to
Hmm.
bring these guys to book. And what they did was they just burnt down all the granaries. They just basically just
Yeah.
completely swept them full of fire so that there couldn't be an accounting. And
Hmm.
then that amazing scene where all the eunuchs were expelled from the Forbidden City, holding their junk in a jar,
Hmm.
basically. But that was a historical moment in the in the movie, and I think back that maybe it's just the eunuchs, just about to be given an accounting, and the way to avoid the accounting is you just torch the place. It's kind of like
That's
there's a Dave Chappelle skit, where he's in, it's a really classic one where he's sitting with his mates, pretending to be the president or something, and everything's going to shit, and then he goes like the questions get heated in court, and he goes, whoa, look at that, whoa, knocks over the knocks over the water
yeah.
jug,
It's kind
runs
of
out, and maybe this
it's
is
sort
just
of
knocking over the
it's
water
kind
jug
of
and running out of the room.
it's kind of the Enron solution. Enron had some bookkeeping problems, to put it mildly. And look what happened! 9/11 happened, and their office got didn't it explode or collapse or something? I think so.
It's the same. Yeah, 9/11
Everything
conspiracy
disappeared.
theory comes also from that because what the 9/11 conspiracy theorists point out is that everybody forgets that the week before 9/11,
Mm.
uh, Ronald Rumsfeld was going to he there was like $1 trillion was lost out of the defense budget.
3.1 trillion.
Or 3.1 trillion, I couldn't remember, but it's an inconceivable amount.
Mm.
And then he was going to have to appear in front of a congressional committee. And then bingo, 9/11, and then it never happened. So
Yeah.
everything was closed. It's like, what was that? I just thought, what the hell? It's incredible what goes on behind the scenes. I think
Terribly bad luck. Yeah.
yeah, it's a pity that people don't give any credence to conspiracy theories, because you only have to pick up a history book and you say it's conspiracy theories wall to wall. I mean, if you go and look at like every premise for war is done with a conspiracy. Like the Gulf of Tonkin before Korea was made up. It was fabricated. All the history shows
No. Gulf of
it's
Tonkin was
now
made
now
up?
it's orthodox. It's orthodox now. Now in high schools they teach that it was fabricated. The
Mm.
Gulf of Tonkin was fabricated. It's established as fact.
Mm.
But if you had said that back at the time, you would have been a tin hat. Like the government could do that. Like the government doesn't do anything else but that.
Mm.
That's what they do. The Pentagon is a pentagon-shaped building where people sit down and come up with conspiracy theories morning, noon, and night. And then people think, well, it can't be real. It's a conspiracy theory. Like, oh, that's all it is real is the conspiracies.
It would be if you were the government, if you and I were the government, it would be very smart for us, for you and me, to do something criminal that was a conspiracy, because then no critics could point it out, because that would just be a conspiracy theory, right?
No, they have a defense. They have a no. That is well known. No, it's the big lie.
Hmm.
So I've known guys. I actually worked for a guy, a CEO, talking of psychopaths, who was who was an operative in the frontline operative in the Mossad. And he would say this exactly this stuff. He'd say they would do the most outrageous things because those were the ones that no one would believe. You could, if you did something absolutely off the charts outrageous, you'd almost definitely get away with it because it just didn't pass the smile test. As soon as you said, "Oh, the Mossad did this and that," then people would say, "Oh, come on!" And so that's the one they would pick for that very reason. They said, "We'll easily get away with this. No one will believe it." And then they would go for the weirdest past things known to man.
It's like when this Zionist inspired terrorist in Norway picked 22 July to blow up the government building in Norway and have a massacre in Norway. And that was 22 July was when the Irgun blew up the King David Hotel in Jerusalem. So if somebody present here would point that out in the newspapers, people would just laugh. Why would a Zionist choose an important Zionist terror date for a terrorist act that was Zionist inspired? That would not make any sense. So that was basically what happened in Norway. I actually got called up by someone called Titlestad, a journalist in NRK, in main media in Norway. And she asked about this Zionist theory of mine, and everybody laughed. It was never printed and never broadcast, and everybody laughed about this. And then 1 year after, in 2012, then everybody said, yeah, he was pro-Israel and he was Zionist inspired, and that was sort of everybody knew that, but you can't say it at once. You have to sort of wait till everybody else is saying it. So him choosing the 22 July date was like an Arab terrorist choosing to strike on 9/11 10 years after 9/11, right? People would connect those two, right?
Yeah, but while we're on conspiracy corner, I mean, if anybody watches this and they think, "Oh, conspiracy," it's like, go and have a look at USS Independence. USS Independence is just an incredible story. I think it's USS Independence, but basically, it was a false flag attack that America and Israel.
No, it's called something else. It's called something else.
USS Liberty.
Liberty.
Is it Liberty or Independence?
Liberty.
I thought it was one of the two. USS Liberty. Yeah. But anyway, it was a false flag attack that was cooked up by America and Israel. It was straight off a spy novel, and basically Israeli planes, marked as Egyptian jets, attacked a U.S. ship that was put there deliberately for that purpose, and U.S. sailors got killed, and you ask anybody about that, nobody's even heard about it. But, it's American Israel don't even deny that now. And you say, like, no, if you just came out with that and said it, no one would believe you, but it's all documented. It's not controversial that happened. So, yeah, it's incredible people's resistance to conspiracy theories because they want to believe the world is nice and normal, and then if they entertain conspiracy theories, it really is too challenging to the whole system and their worldview. They get challenged to the core that maybe all the people in charge are not there for their benefit, and it's kind of like saying, maybe daddy's a child molester and mommy's a hooker. And then, it's like, no, I'm not, what? Yeah, then you're like, you can show them any amount of evidence, but the psychological block to seeing the obvious, so like, sorry, man, but that's the truth. And you have to be a little bit traumatized or something to be able to see it, because a healthy person has defenses against seeing what actually goes on. Just to keep their sanity, really. it means that their ego and their worldview and their sanity are kept intact by their doubt and incredulity about conspiracy theories.
Yeah, but if you're talking about releasing a virus that could potentially kill 1 billion people or something on the planet, like this one here, then obviously are you talking about qualified psychopaths, sociopaths, right? Like government people. Or are you talking about total amateurs who don't know what they're doing and just thought they were going to stop the tar sands project or something, and then it got a little bit out of hand?
I don't think it can be amateurs, because to develop this kind of thing, you need ferrets, right? I think the only way, I mean, I'm out of my depth here, but I don't think you can really propagate this thing in a petri dish. I think the only way you can actually propagate it is in ferrets, as far as I know. They have a similar response in their lungs to us. So you need quite a good laboratory to actually do it. It's not just like homeschool, biochemistry. So, but the thing is, they were doing that in Wuhan. So I think all the indications is it's a bioweapons. It's an accidental bioweapons release, but it's not a way out incredible, conspiracy theory, because they're doing this research. America's doing this research in Port Stanley.
I know, but
they're doing research into these things. So chances of a leak coming out are very high, and they're not going to say, "Oopsie, mea culpa, my bad." And they say, "We're very sorry, but there was an accidental release, and that's going to be, on Time magazine." It's like they're not going to tell you if there's an accidental release. Nobody would. If it came, whatever.
But I've seen TV fiction, and I've read literary fiction, where the common theme has been that you have some pretty dark green environmental extremists, right? Or let's say very serious ecologists, right? And these people are often young, and they study and they choose what they study, and they can get in and get a job at the laboratory, right? So they can actually sort of be a Trojan horse, or sort of smuggle themselves into that kind of position, and still keep their ideological thoughts as teenagers or young 20s, and just go straight into one of those laboratory environments, and then they can work over time and have their little pet projects with some little virus or animal testing for that. It's possible, right?
It's not inconceivable. You see, the Rosenbergs and people like, if you look at the development of the atomic bomb, there's so many people like the Rosenbergs who got hung for giving secrets to the Russians. But there were a lot of people that were ideological moles in the the nuclear weapons program. Exactly that format that you said, that they hid their ideology for decades and passed secrets. And so, yeah, it's conceivable. I mean, but how would you ever tell that? The takeaway I feel is the fact is, you want to having these bioweapons labs all around the world that they're doing this research in, because otherwise the possibilities of all this increases. But I think the evidence is for it being a bioweapon is the exhibit A is the Chinese response. It's just the fact that they took down. I mean, it's pretty obvious who the patient zero is. It worked for, she worked in a lab for this fat woman, and they kind of airbrushed her out of history, which is a bit suspicious. And then the doctor that died of it, who got censured for mentioning it. That was very suspicious. But the physical evidence for it is that really, I think from what I read, there are 4 mutations from the closest, I think, relative of this coronavirus. So people have said, no, you could never come up with a gain of function of like 4 mutations in a lab. That's too much. They say, like, well, the same applies times n for natural, selection. It's like you cannot, it's harder for nature to come up with 4 mutations than then cross over than it is for a lab. A lab can do that in intensive cycles.
Okay. Right. But when I have to supplement you when you talk about parties that look guilty. So you mentioned China and their official reaction. I would say that could be characterized as CYA, cover your ass, right? So something happens, and they are the Chinese Communist Party. They want to cover their ass and pretend nothing happened, and then it gets out, everybody knows about it, then pretend even more that nothing happened, and then, just say that, oh, we screwed up, right? So that's possible. But I think maybe I have a too high picture of what government scientists and stuff and doctors are doing or should be doing. But I think if you are sitting in Geneva working for the WHO in March, April 2020, and you are doing a Q&A session, a question and answer session, and telling the global audience what to do and what to fear and what to not do about the virus. And when you get asked, can this virus spread from one kid to another? And in late March of 2020, you answer, no. We have seen some kids who have been infected by it, but it can't spread from one child to another child. So I mean, they are not this stupid. We know they are not this stupid. So you have like the ECDC in Stockholm, which is responsible for the entire European area. They are going around saying it can't spread from human to human. And like 2 months after they made this stupid mistake, the WHO is still saying that it can't spread from one human child to another human child. It's just just a variant of the first, right? They're still sort of dragging their feet, and I think all countries in the world are still letting nurses and doctors treat patients with the virus without protection gear for aerosol infection, which is what they have to do because this thing is aerosolized and it can spread like 100 meters in ventilated rooms and stuff. So it's like, yeah, let's say that the Chinese screwed up and something got out over there, but that doesn't explain how everybody's acting like the most stupid person in you in your life, and sort of going around there like clowns and say, oh, we didn't know it could spread from a human being to another human being, and at least not a child to another child, because we don't. Oh, everybody knows that the child can't spread diseases to other children, like colds, which are also coronaviruses. That's totally unheard of, one child getting a cold from another child, right? So it's like you'd have to, everybody on the planet who works in the health industries, etc., they would have to get this prion brain wasting disease at the exact same time, and walk around and giving just crap advice and letting nurses and doctors work unprotected, and letting bus drivers and taxi drivers work unprotected for 4 months, and it's just not credible, that people would be
Well,
that stupid.
what the Hanlon's razor says that don't credit anybody. Don't credit maliciousness with something that can be put down to stupidity.
Yeah, but still, I mean, come on.
Yeah, I think the biggest stupid maker is not like prions in the brain. It's money.
Mm-hmm.
Is what these guys are doing is money. So that if you just hold that the dollar in mind,
Mm-hmm.
all the thing about PPE and all the stuff is just imagine these guys have like spent the budgets. They've taken all the PPE equipment and sold it off years ago because they never thought there'd be a pandemic. So a lot of people are doing CYA, and then it all appears as stupidity later. But it's not. It's really just covering CYA stuff, I think, as far as I can tell.
So for the children, advice that no, a human child cannot infect another human child, which the WHO said in March. That is meant to increase money making, because then their parents can go to work because the kids are not home.
It's to keep business as usual, and there are also things. Look at all the cages on the southern border. So basically, migrant work and migrant labor is a big thing that's not being talked about is migrant labor, and that their kids Mexicans, illegals come across the border, the southern border, with their kids, to actually work. And that work is like picking the crops and working in the fields in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to allow these guys to come through. If they're saying no, the ICE detention centers now where they taking kids away and putting kids, they'll have to release those kids. They don't. A lot of those kids now, they've lost track of who their parents are. Their parents are lost in the system, or basically have been repatriated. And so if there's going to be a hell to pay if they say, well, you've got to let all the kids out of those ICE detention centers. But I think there's a large thing about the economics of schooling in America. Schooling is a big business. It's a multi-billion-dollar business, and it's trillion-dollar business. And they know that the government is on the hook for childcare, child support. If the kids are at home and people have to go out to work, they know pretty well that if the kids are at home, a lot of people will have to stay at home with them and just withdraw from the labor force. And they can't afford that. They can't afford a general worker strike. So they have to keep on faking out the lethality of this, And the other thing is keep on faking out when, how long lockdown will be. So they know lockdown is months. But they have to say, it's a few weeks and it'll be over by Easter. And then they have they increase it by 2 weeks, They know how much lockdown is going to be because it's a mathematical formula.
Yeah.
But they're not going to tell you that, because if they told you, well, you're going to be in lockdown for 6 months or some huge amount of arbitrary time, people will rearrange their whole lives. They would, stop working and give up, and essential workers and.
But what about?
And they can't have that, so they keep on lying.
But what about parents and the kids themselves? Are the kids going to take this? Being sent to school to get infected and possibly die? Are they going to take this for forever?
Well, where we headed for is a wartime ethos. So if they true to form, they will treat this with Dunkirk spirit, and you'll start seeing propaganda saying like, we must get to work. Basically, like going to work is a patriotic duty, like running at the machine guns in World War One. And then they will encourage people to say, yes, people are dying in the workforce, but we have to go to work. This country is, people will starve and die if the economy goes to crap. And they will send people off like soldiers into McDonald's and Starbucks. And people will think, very soon I predict that you'll be seeing people with stickers saying, with red, white, and blue saying, I'm risking my life for, COVID, and I'm here to give you your latte. I mean, a complete apeshit, bizarre psychology, but
Mm.
that's where we'll get to. I mark my words, and I'll put money on it that we will get to the stage where people will be going as if it's their patriotic duty in a wartime situation to go to work
Mm-hmm.
and keep things functioning. And that ethos was very strong. If you look at the Blitz and stuff, the pictures of milkmen and stuff crawling through the rubble to deliver milk. Now, it's freaking ridiculous. The whole street is bombed out. The last thing
Mm.
they need is a delivery of milk. But it's psychological because people want to say that it's business as usual. As long as I can deliver milk, I show that basically we're not doomed.
Mm-hmm.
Things can get back to normal. As soon as I stop delivering milk to people's doorsteps, that's an admission that we are screwed.
So you're saying basically that people's will to self-delusion will help the government propaganda effort. Yeah.
Massively. I'm surprised it hasn't started yet, but they should be starting. As soon as it becomes obvious that, it's not 2 weeks and over,
Mm.
expect government's propaganda machine to start this thing where they see in they're masters of this. They learned this in World War One and World War Two, particularly with guys like Eddie Bernays, but even people like Beaverbrook during the Second World War. He got them to collect aluminum pans, pots and pans and
Yeah,
stuff, and melt
I
them.
heard about that.
You can't get a pot and pan at the most it's 20-25 aluminum. It's junk aluminum in a pan.
Mm.
You can't make a Spitfire out of it. It's just not high enough quality. And anyway, there were no smelters and there was no energy. It takes a lot of energy to melt it. So it was completely propaganda. And they got all the railings and they tore them down in World War One to make guns, presumably. I mean, was what they told the public. But it was a complete sham. The railings were just chucked in the Thames.
Yeah.
And some people tried to tell the population, look, stop tearing down your railings and it's just being chucked in the sea. And they were prosecuted. It was basically a sedition to tell them that it was just a hoax.
Mm.
And I mean, in my life, I've met Britons that are absolutely convinced that they won the Battle of Britain by collecting the aluminum pots and pans. And I told them all that stuff was chucked in landfills.
Chucked in the
And they
Thames.
were me, but I go and show them, and they're incensed. They don't want to believe that they were that badly hoodwinked, and they will do the same with us now. We'll have the version of like little ribbons for you. You're starting to see it with the medical professionals that our brave frontline soldiers in the trenches and the medical establishment that are putting their lives on the risk and stuff. And it's like, you might as well send those guys home. I don't think they're going to make any difference.
It was
people don't want to believe that. They want to be patriotic and feel in control.
It was pretty telling that you mentioned that the WHO they dragged their feet until mid-March before admitting it was a pandemic. But already in January, while they were still saying this is not a pandemic, we don't even know if it spreads from person to person, the WHO came out with this website or whatever, and they had already ready a campaign against the infodemic, the info epidemic. So they had an infodemic system of propaganda or communication already ready, and we know already today that this video, for instance, will be featured on YouTube with a little warning about you should check out the WHO, which is has excellent information.
Information on the coronavirus.
Yeah, and also and also this video will not be searchable because that happens to daily to other videos. You won't find
demonetized.
You won't find it in search, and if I put one of the words, one of the many names for the virus in the headline, it won't even appear on my latest videos. I'm not totally sure. It's not.
You just put a code name, right? So
yeah.
Everybody just puts a
Code name 19, for instance, or something like that.
Yeah, they're so easy to get around, but I mean, it's ridiculous how you see. I've lived this. I grew up with this in South Africa, so it's not strange territory. It's just remarkable for me how naive everybody is, and they just they're so innocent, and they think that governments don't. Governments have whole departments of people. They have thousands of people thinking up the shit that people dismiss as conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
So it's almost like the Ministry of Truth banner underneath this video saying you must go to the Ministry of Truth to get real information, and people go there thinking that's the last place you're going to get. But what happens in these situations is people learn slowly how and a dialogue starts with the propaganda machine. So after a while you do go to the WHO, because just like Pravda tells you what the real story is by not telling you or downplaying this and emphasizing this, so this is the important thing and that's not, and and then eventually they start to realize the public has cottoned on to their games. They know that they're underreporting, and then they start over-reporting. And then you get into this game where they try and second guess, and you read, but you can tease out what's happening if you're a big enough cynic from Pravda.
Yeah.
Because basically what their techniques of propaganda are, and once you know that, you can read the news pretty well. Until the point where they realize that you're reading the news pretty well.
Yeah, it's almost like everybody
that's what we had.
Yeah, everybody who says who engages in the various forums on the internet today, they know that China was faking their numbers, but that's sort of a truth that can be used to conceal another lie, because if everybody and their grandmother knows that China faked their numbers, that means that America is not faking their numbers, or Britain is not faking their numbers, right? So it's like
but every now and again you get little peaks behind the scenes, and you can get a little peek behind the curtain as long as you're looking for it and stuff. But it's the thing is what they do is distraction, and they say hey, look at this, and then make this conclusion is what they want. And if you're clever, you can go, hey, look at this, and go, hey, wait a minute, if that is true, that implies bloody, bloody, blah. And you can find a whole raft of shit that just suddenly, I'll give you an example. I knew this for a fact, that they've been doing sewage surveillance in America for a long time, because it's a very good way of finding people that are making weapons labs and stuff like that. Is you look in the sewage, if people have a lab or something like that, they have a lot of the chemicals going down the sewage. So they soon detected this in the department. And what I'm telling you is secret now. But the DHS, I believe it's secret. I believe I could be prosecuted for it. I don't give a fuck. So here, what the DHS did, they started putting sensors down all the basically sewage arteries, because obviously you can trace it all the way back to a household and find there's some Islamic terrorists. Then of course, when they find them, they don't say that that's how they find them. They say, oh, the little old lady over the road. So where's the little old lady that rats the road? But anyway, you see, now using those same systems, right? They figured, well, you can track everybody. Well, there's limit to what you can do. They started doing DNA fingerprinting. So I had on my website, just to troll the guys on my Sirius Institute website, the same thing, buy some bad guy DNA, basically legitimate DNA from Saddam Hussein and Bin Laden, and just put it down your toilet just to troll him, because the whole system's gonna light up in your neighborhood if you put Saddam Hussein's DNA down there. And but going further from this, they realized that you can do epidemiology. It's a great use of epidemiology. And then they let slip the ball. And this is my point here, is that they said in this little article that some reporter must have not realized they were letting slip a lot more than they were allowed to, said, well, there must be a lot more cases in America because sewage surveillance shows there are about 500 times the number of official figures. Like,
Okay.
now, if you propaganda savvy, then you go that, you know, the takeaway from the article is they want you to come to the conclusion, hey, there are a lot more cases, but there's a lot bigger nugget in that, and it's they're doing sewage surveillance. They know what the fucking figures are.
Okay. Yeah.
You see, I just give it as an example of how you get to read between the lines, but you're never going to be able to become fluent in propaganda while you think there's no such thing as a conspiracy theory. It's like, you're a sheep straight out of the gate.
I'm kind of a conspiracy theory skeptic because I don't really think that people are so evil that they would cooperate about doing something criminal, you know, or deadly. You know, apart from perhaps the German Nazi regime, because they were evil according to several history books and stuff. But sitting down in a room planning to do something nefarious, do you think criminals would really do that?
No, yeah, okay, I get it. So you see, a lot of people think, absolutely, you nailed it. And it's a good thing you raised this point. So let me explain it to you. Is nobody sits down in a room and thinks we're going to be evil. That's not human nature. What's diabolical about it is people sit down in a room thinking we're going to do some good. All these guys think they're doing good. And that's what's diabolical about it.
Yeah.
You see, the guy on the side, they think they're doing good. That the guys that are making these bioweapons, the guys in Raytheon, the guys that do all the satellite technology, the surveillance technology, they absolutely go to church every day. They pride themselves on being the best people in the world, and they're completely sanctimonious and self-righteous, even though they work on atomic weapons. And they think they are doing the right thing. It's inconceivable to them, any one of these ACABs that are in the DHS and doing these systems, they think they're saving lives. They think they're protecting America. It never occurs to them that, you know, they shouldn't be. The guys are genuinely doing what they think is the right thing.
But then you have that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right?
It is. I mean, I'll tell you one conspiracy theory, like which I think is more conspiracy fact these days. I think most historians will accept it. But America was brought into World War I with the sinking of the Lusitania. The Lusitania was put there as a target that they fought the Germans in the First World War to sinking Lusitania. And they did it by putting a whole lot of arms secretly on a passenger ship, and then presumably letting the
Germans
Reich know, because it left them no option. They either had to sink it, in which case America was dragged into the war, otherwise this huge amount of arms came on the island. And so they were stuck either way. But the Germans announced in the paper in New York, they said, don't get on the ship, it's full of arms and it's going to be safe.
But they put adverts. They put adverts in the New York Times. The Germans paid for adverts in the New York Times.
Yeah, but it was a flop. Now think about it. Think about the guys who set up this. They set up this diabolical plot with the Lusitania and killed 300 people. I can't remember, maybe 1,000 innocent civilians. They all thought that they were doing the right thing. They all thought that bringing America into the war, and they're doing this consequentialist kind of calculation, and they think the ends justify the means, and that's the pattern you see all over the place. These guys are consequentialists. They will write off all these thousands, and they will go home, have a scotch, and say, well, it's for the greater good. Overall, it'll save lives. They did it with, you know, just the bombing of, say, you know, all the bombings really, but the bombing of Coventry and stuff that they knew in ahead about. You know, basically Bomber Harris's bombing. Bomber Harris was a war criminal that committed genocide and executed mass destruction, and he uh, he was considered justified because it ended the war quicker or some bullshit
Mm.
argument. And that's how everybody's working. So it's nobody's sitting down as a Bond villain. Hollywood's done us a great service by making these people into ha 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 evil. Because
Mm.
no one is evil like that. People are evil as in like, I'm an authoritarian, I'm rational, I'm
Mm.
sane, and what I'm saying is for the greater good.
But
And
the
they'll convince at least 50% of the room.
but the Lusitania move, that sounds like a chess move because you have something called a fork where you have two options. Uh, it's your turn and you have two options, and if you don't do that, you do that, right? It's like a chess
The
move.
decision tree.
Yeah,
Yeah, the decision tree.
yeah.
But they work these things out with decision trees. A lot of these
Mm.
things came from the RAND organization and people like John Nash and the Cold War. They work these things out
Mm.
with decision trees, where all the things like game theory comes from and the matrices, payoff matrices, and they're working with these things. I guarantee you now, there are guys in the Pentagon that have decision tables and payoff matrices, and they're working it out on the chalkboard in front of people in secret meetings, going like, well, we could go this way, but what happens if we nuke Beijing? The
Mm.
outcome here, follow this through, and our models show that only 10 million people die. But if you do blah, blah, and then 100 million, and then, then everybody in the room goes, yeah, okay, makes sense. And then they initiate this whole program. And then, naive liberals come and say, it's impossible that a whole big load of people in a machine got together. Yes, they did. They made it as a battle plan. They executed it for years, and after a while, they just lived with it, and it didn't seem all that strange to them.
Mm.
You eventually get accustomed to any lunatic fringe thing.
But if I tell you that Swedish radio just told me yesterday that the European Union just decided to go for the European Green New Deal, like just a week before this virus hit. So, is it possible that closing down and reducing air traffic and all of these things that we do with the virus is a some kind of deep state forced Green New Deal thing that is meant to get us over into the new energy system?
No, because the dots, there are too many gaps in the dots there.
Mm.
So the people are opportunists. So, for example, take what's happening now in the South China Sea. Now, China I mean, I think we're heading for a war in the South China Sea over Taiwan. And then it's easier to say, well, the Chinese fleet is maneuvering now because the American fleet and the Eisenhower left
Mm-hmm.
because they all have COVID. They went back to Guam.
Mm.
And instantly, China's taking advantage of that and moving its fleet into the South China Sea. You can't really have two aircraft carriers next door to each other. One moves out, the other one moves in.
Mm.
They kind of occupied that territory in a way, and so it's kind of a prelude to war. Just the fact that they move the Chinese aircraft carrier is moving, but anyway, if you're a conspiracy theorist, you'd say, well, then China must have released this because, they anticipated that American sailors would get it and they would have to leave, the fleet would have to leave the South China Sea, and then they could move and say, no. They just basically taking, they wanted forever to get to Taiwan. They have plans for how to invade Taiwan. And some arsehole is sitting there going, you know what? This would be an awesome time to pull out Plan B. So
Mm.
the other mistake the conspiracy theorists make is they think everything is a long line of things. These guys have plans in their drawer for everything. I'll tell you, I'll give you any money you like.
Mm.
That there's some plan in somebody's drawer in the Pentagon that says like, if global warming gets too bad, we could always nuke China and create a nuclear winter to
Mm.
kill two birds with one stone, China and basically reduce global warming. I bet you there's a plan. It won't ever be implemented, but you see, if with so many plans and possibilities out there, it's you can always get to a bizarre situation at a bizarre time where somebody pulls out a really bizarre thing out of the hat and then they're off to the races. That doesn't mean that it was planned from all the way
No, no,
from the
no. But
initiation.
it's like China and Chinese have played Go, the Chinese board game, which is twice as old as chess and like
Go, go,
100 times more complex and complicated than chess.
go, yeah,
So they
go.
played this for 4,000 years, and all their young Korean and Japanese and Chinese emperor sons they will be trained in this because you learn how to watch your back and your side and your front and your top and your below. To watch all sides at the same time and to sort of have contingencies for if something starts happening over here on the board, you need to do this and this. So I don't put it beyond China or the Chinese intelligentsia to have cracked this kind of come up with this kind of battle plan, because you also need to think about that China was this year, if nothing else happened this year, China would surpass America as the biggest economy on the planet, right? So,
Yeah.
and they also have this big Belt and Road initiative to take over basically half the world. So these are sort of great geopolitical times, and all of a sudden there comes a virus that puts the whole planet on its head, and it's kind of it would be very strange, I think, if it didn't have anything to do with anything else. And you can also talk about that the 2019 was the most tumultuous year when it comes to social uprising and people storming the squares and streets in almost every continent. And from the government from the government perspective, you needed to regain control of the people, and all of these things happened like in the past of 12 months, right? So and with the environment and the climate movement and the school strikes and stuff as well. So
yeah, it's very easy to see that things were coming to a head in 2020. That's why I did in my book. It's a very easy call. It's very difficult to get the details right, but to just say, oh yeah, this is the year, it's easy. But one thing I would really like to point out to liberals is that they think everybody's nice. And it's sort of true, but what they are missing is that they don't seem to get, and this is a very important for the environmental movement and green activism in general, is that these guys are not as nice as you. They can't be persuaded, and the reason why they can't be persuaded is they're playing Go all the time, as you mentioned. They're playing five-dimensional chess, and you are just one move in the five-dimensional chess game. So it's not a question of, say, XR winning the government over, or raising awareness. And raising awareness then is just one little chip that must be integrated into their five-dimensional chess game. And so, it's saying like, so Roger Hallam or somebody saying that we'll get 3.5% of the population, and then that'll, say like, you haven't even got one pawn on this five-dimensional board that they're playing. And there you think you're going to sweep the board. You don't even understand the game. You're not even going to make it. And that's where they're really stupid, because they think everybody's nice and apolitical and just have innocent moments, motives like saving the planet. And he was like, it's like you must think of that in terms of these guys are playing five-dimensional. You're in a game of five-dimensional chess by all the big players and powerful players in the world, and you're running what activists are doing is running in and out between the legs of the horses or these knights in this big medieval battle. They're not really part of the battle, although they think they are, because nobody writes in a newspaper really, except maybe in like Foreign Affairs or a journal like that, which activists would never read. They don't write what these guys call the great game. It's called the great game. And this is the game that's been going on. Now, you can't even begin to start playing the great game as an amateur on the outside if you don't understand the core thing. Well, the thing in the middle is money, in particular debt and credit. And so I, basically trying to say, look, if you want to play in this game, which is like XR wants to, is you have to, get a crash course in, and I'm not talking economics. Economics, they won't tell you what the game is. The game's secret. The game is credit and debt. So you have to figure out how the debt system works, and if you want to be a player, attack that. That's what they all basically. That's the queen that's maneuvering around the thing. So if you want to play this game, go for their queen. They discount you as a pawn because a pawn will never take a queen. So that, activism will never change the oil industry or do anything because these are big heavyweight players on a game that activists don't even understand. So it's just my little rant to say that these guys are not really evil. They're psychopaths, and they're playing 5D chess all the time, and you don't even know that, let alone how to play 5D chess. So, and they're so arrogant, they won't listen. I mean, I could at least get them started on how the 5D chess. They would never listen to a person like me because I'm not nice. It's like, there are no nice people to explain this game to you. It's like, I want to learn, like, all in, no holds barred, bare hand knuckle boxing. But I want somebody nice to teach me. It's like, trust me.
Don't hit me. Stop hitting me. Stop hitting me. Good. Fantastic. Okay, I think we're almost laughing ourselves to an end here. So I think maybe we should leave it at that, and while we're on a high note, and come back and discuss more about the virus and the geopolitics of the virus in June. What do you say about that?
Oh yeah, well I'm in lockdown, so I expect to be in lockdown in June. So anytime, yeah. Quite happy. Nice to talk to you.
Okay, thank you very much. It's been very interesting. So just hang on after I put the thing on, and then we just exchange some niceties. Okay. Thank you, public. This has been nice, and see you guys back in my next segment.